On this Sunday night from Edmonton, the final countdown to the Alberta election. The last appeals to voters.
People here pay attention.
What's at stake for the two leaders? And we dig into our latest polling just released, showing how tight a race it could be. Turkey's president claims victory. In a close race, Erdogan extends his 20 years of increasingly authoritarian rule. Escalation in Ukraine. Russia unleashes a major air attack on Kyiv. Plus, a high-profile endorsement in Alberta.
It's something about this incarnation of this person scares me.
Why Calgary's former mayor believes Danielle Smith is an existential threat to the province.
Global National with Donna Friesen, reporting tonight from Edmonton.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We'll get to the Alberta election in just a moment, but we begin with an out-of-control wildfire on the edge of Halifax. Police say it has engulfed multiple homes in the municipality of Tantallon. That's about half an hour west of Halifax. A number of fire crews have been called in to help. Thousands of people have been told to leave their homes in multiple communities in the region.
We do not have this fire under control, and we are receiving reports from our frontline firefighters that this fire is still moving.
The fire has taken off because it's 31 degrees in Halifax today, and after a very dry spring and winds gusting at 60 kilometers an hour, that fire is burning fast. Now to Alberta. We are in Edmonton on the last day of campaigning before the provincial election that, if the opinion polls are accurate, could be tight. The latest Ipsos polling done for Global News gives Danielle Smith's United Conservatives an overall edge province-wide, ahead by 5 percentage points over Rachel Notley's New Democrats. In Calgary, home of the most competitive seats, the two parties appear tied. We'll dig into our polling in just a moment. The leaders are in a final push for support. Notley met supporters in Red Deer and Edmonton, promising to improve healthcare, education, and deliver a more reliable government. Smith ran the 5K race at the Calgary Marathon today. The populist Conservative and former talk radio host has warned re-electing the NDP would be too costly for Albertans. Nowhere is the race closer right now than in battleground Calgary, especially in the suburban neighbourhoods of the city's south. Heather Yourex-West spent the day door-knocking in two key ridings.
Glenmore Trail. It's a busy Calgary thoroughfare on any given day. And to the south, you'll find the ridings that hold Alberta's political fate.
The NDP is already going to win the seats in Northeast Calgary, in the downtown core, and parts of the Northwest surrounding the University of Calgary. There's a lot of seats south of Glenmore Trail. Therefore, that's where they have to penetrate.
Hi, it's Najwan with Alberta NDP. How are you?
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Najwan Al-Janed is a first-time candidate for the NDP, trying to flip the riding of Calgary-Glenmore.
I have spent the last 15 years in the energy sector. People here pay attention. They have many questions. The number one concern so far that I've noticed is healthcare and the status of our healthcare system.
I'm a little frustrated with both parties, to be honest. In the end, it's NDP is just closer to where I stand for. So.
Well, I'm glad to hear.
Good morning.
Healthcare is a key focus in the neighboring riding of Calgary-Acadia 2, where the NDP's Diana Batten, a registered nurse, is taking on Tyler Shandro, a former health minister for the UCP.
Going up against a health minister or not, I'm here to provide a choice of different type of support for Calgary-Acadia, and they've been incredibly receptive to it.
Now, we did reach out to the UCP candidates for both Calgary-Glenmore and Acadia, but neither the teams for Tyler Shandro or Whitney Isaac responded to our request. So in the interests of balance, we thought we would do some door knocking of our own. So you got a Tyler Shandro sign.
Yeah.
What appeals to you this selection about Shandro?
I saw what the NDP did last time, and yeah, it was atrocious. I'm not a fan of either party, but right now it's a lesser of two evils.
If the lawn signs tell the story, the race in these ridings appears incredibly tight, a bellwether perhaps for what's to come Monday, in a race that could go either way. Heather Yourex-West, Global News, Calgary.
When Rachel Notley's NDP won the election here in 2015, it ended decades of Conservative rule, but 4 years later, she lost to the new United Conservative Party. In that election, the NDP won just 24 of Alberta's 87 seats. The UCP won 63, and to win this time, the NDP has to gain 20 seats, while the UCP could lose 19 and still win. With me now from Calgary is our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson. Mercedes, for the NDP to win, it is going to be a big climb. What do you see in our latest polling numbers?
Well, Donna, our latest polling numbers show that the race remains very tight, but the polling firm says that the UCP could be knocking on the door of a majority. They have managed to recover some support. Let's break down the numbers in some of the key areas, starting with where you are in Edmonton. In Edmonton, the polling shows that 57% of voters are prepared to vote for the NDP. That's who they're leaning towards heading into Election Day, while 40% say the UCP. That puts the NDP at 17 points ahead. In rural areas, the UCP has a huge advantage. 65% say that they are leaning towards the UCP, while 31% say the NDP. That is a lead of 34 points for the UCP. Now in battleground Calgary, where I am, the city that is expected to decide this election, absolutely neck and neck. A literal statistical tie, 49% UCP, 49% NDP. So, Donna, very, very tight heading into the end of this race. The UCP has managed to recover some voters who are women. There is now an even split between them, and there is an increasing split between those who say there should or should not be change in the government, that it's time for that. The UCP has managed to regain some support there on folks who feel that maybe they're willing to give them a second chance.
Mercedes, we know there's a history of polls getting things wrong. They should be treated with some skepticism. How much do we know about the undecided and the possible vote switchers, people who say they're Conservative but they intend to vote NDP this time?
So this is the big risk for the Conservatives, and it's not just whether or not they vote NDP, it's whether they simply stay home. I've talked to a lot of well-known Conservatives out here who tell me they don't know if they're going to vote for Danielle Smith, and while they might not be prepared to cast a vote for Rachel Notley, they might just stay in their house. And if that happens, that is a risk to the UCP in some of these very tight ridings, and it's something that's often not captured in polls. We've seen polls be wrong in Alberta before. We don't know about this one, but it'll be interesting to see just how honest people have been with pollsters.
And we've seen little of Danielle Smith this weekend. She doesn't seem to have been out campaigning, or if she is, it's under the radar. How unusual is that for a leader just before the vote?
So it's not unusual for them to not talk to us in the media, but it is unusual for them not to be out trying to show big crowds. But that can be a tactic that's used if a campaign believes their leader is a liability and not an asset. And one of the things that I've heard from UCP candidates going door to door here is that they've been trying to convince people, vote for me because I'm the incumbent versus vote for the leader, because they say a lot of people are telling them they're not big fans of Danielle Smith.
Okay, Mercedes Stephenson in Calgary, thanks. Voters in Turkey have decided to stay with the man who led an increasingly totalitarian government for 20 years. Recep Tayyip Erdoğan has been declared winner of the runoff election. Redmond Shannon looks at how he did it and what it could mean for Turkey's future.
A celebration chorus from Turkey's Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, declaring victory for 5 more years as president. Erdogan's latest success is remarkable. After 20 years in power as Prime Minister and then President, he faced criticism for the handling of February's deadly earthquakes and for his controversial strategy of lowering interest rates to tackle inflation. It still sits at 44%.
It goes against all common sense. It goes against, if you're political science people would say, that how did this happen? But yes, once again, a strong Turkey, the issues of identity.
Erdogan's identity politics is rooted in religion and tradition, railing against LGBT rights and cracking down on independent media, with thousands of political opponents arrested or jailed.
I think Turkey is going to continue that illiberal turn that we're seeing across the world, whether it's in Hungary and Poland.
The defeated secularist challenger Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu had tried to court the nationalist vote in the days leading up to the runoff, echoing Erdogan by promising to deport some of Turkey's millions of Syrian refugees. Erdogan's foreign policy will likely continue to mirror the geography of Turkey, straddling east and west. The NATO member state provides arms to Ukraine, but Erdogan is close to Vladimir Putin, and he has been keen to act as a mediator in the conflict on the other side of the Black Sea. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
Coming up, sirens ring out over Ukraine's capital as Russia unleashes a wave of airstrikes. Whoever wins the election tomorrow will occupy the Premier's office here at the Alberta Legislature in Edmonton. We're back in a moment. To the war in Ukraine now. The country's capital has endured Russia's largest drone attack of the invasion. For hours, more than 50 Iranian-made drones targeted Kyiv. According to defense officials, most of them were shot down, but one person was killed. Touria Izri reports.
Sirens rang out in the Ukrainian capital as drones swarmed the city. The explosions echoed for hours while Russia unleashed drone strike after drone strike. The biggest attack of its kind since the start of the war. Something started to explode above us, says this woman. The children began running in fear. The onslaught killed a 41-year-old man and sent a 35-year-old woman to hospital. It also damaged the Ukrainian Society of the Blind. They would come here to chat, says this member. This was like their home. The Ukrainian Air Force says it shot down more than 50 Iranian-made drones. The raid coincided with Kyiv Day, which marks the city's founding almost 1,600 years ago.
What Russia is trying to do in all of this is to try and drain Ukrainian air defense missiles ahead of its highly anticipated spring counteroffensive.
A top Ukrainian security official wouldn't name a date, but insisted that counteroffensive is imminent. The Kremlin issued its own warning. In an interview with the BBC, Russia's ambassador to the UK says Moscow has not started to act seriously yet in Ukraine.
It's a big idealistic mistake to think that Ukraine may prevail.
This is just bluster and bravado, and that's all it is.
Russia's ally, Iran, has provided Moscow with weapons throughout the conflict, like the drones used in this latest attack. As a result, Ukraine's president wants to slap sanctions on the Iranian regime for 50 years. Touria Izri, Global News, Ottawa.
In the U.S., Democrats and Republicans have reached a tentative debt ceiling deal to raise the federal government's $31.4 trillion borrowing limit just days before a possible default. Top congressional Republican Kevin McCarthy struck a deal with President Joe Biden late yesterday. Details are still being ironed out, but it suspends the debt ceiling until January 2025. It boosts defense spending and caps spending for many discretionary domestic programs. A vote is expected in the House as early as Wednesday. Show of support ahead why Calgary's former mayor has gone public with his endorsement in the Alberta election. You're looking at Calgary's Heritage Park on the banks of the Glenmore Reservoir and the Elbow River. We're back from Alberta in a moment. There have been a couple of big late-stage endorsements in the Alberta election campaign. Former Conservative Prime Minister Stephen Harper put out this video.
There's only one option to protect the economic livelihoods of you and your family. That's Danielle Smith and the United Conservative Party.
And former Calgary Mayor Naheed Nenshi endorsed NDP leader Rachel Notley, even showing up at a campaign event with her. In the past, he's been careful not to publicly back any party. This time, he told me he couldn't remain silent.
The reason I did this is because on balance, this election has to be about trust. And it has to be about leadership, and it has to be about competence. The stakes have never been higher. And the challenge is not if Danielle Smith wins, will she implement the UCP platform? That's fine. The question is which Danielle Smith will show up to work. And the one that has been way off of the UCP platform, frankly, scares me a little bit. So will we get the Danielle Smith who has had years and years of speaking out against people who may not fit in the mainstream? We've had a Danielle Smith who has spent her entire career talking about how people should have to pay for health care to reduce the demand for public health care, who now says, no, don't listen to what I said
yes,
before.
well, she says, don't listen to what I said before. So what do you make of that?
What that said to me was, I've got no core. I've got no ethics. I've got nothing that I stand for. I will just do whatever is politically popular. She'll be elected with people who've come from an organization called Take Back Alberta, and they never answer the question, take it back from whom exactly?
For people watching this across the country who don't know Take Back Alberta, can you concisely tell people what?
Think MAGA, think Trump. And so I'm nervous that her caucus is made up of these folks. You know, think of Kevin McCarthy in the United States. He won the narrowest of victories, but instead of using that as a lesson to be more moderate, he actually allowed the radical right to pull his strings.
And that's what you're afraid would happen here.
There's a difference, though, where Kevin McCarthy is happy to have Marjorie Taylor Greene pull his strings. In this scenario, Danielle Smith is Marjorie Taylor Greene.
You have said that Danielle Smith is an existential threat to the province. That's
big words.
Those are big words.
A lot of syllables. But yeah, no, that was hard for me to say, because I've known Danielle for 30 years, but something about this incarnation of this person scares me.
Scares you because you're afraid.
I don't know what she's going to do.
What is Rachel Notley's biggest vulnerability, do you think?
I was the mayor when she was premier. I worked with her very closely. I didn't love it. I didn't think she was the best premier I ever worked with, and there were lots of things that we really disagreed on. So, but I think she can defend her record by simply saying, I had your best interests at heart. And yes, I took office during a terrible global recession, but there were more jobs in Alberta at the end than there were at the beginning. But she's allowed herself to be defined on the economy in a way that gets a lot of people across the river here who work in oil and gas nervous.
So you've endorsed the NDP. How many Conservatives in this province do you think who maybe can't bring themselves to vote for Danielle Smith will vote NDP?
That's the core question of this election. What are those people going to do? And I call it the hold your nose choices. Will they hold their nose and vote for Danielle Smith and believe their UCP candidate who says, don't worry, we'll get rid of her after the election? Do they hold their nose and just stay home? And we're hearing a lot of that. But then for a lot of folks, that's letting other people make the choice for me. Yeah. Or do they hold their nose and vote for Rachel? But ultimately, I don't know. But which of those three nose-holding things they do is what decides the election.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Who to trust next? I talked to some Albertans about what they're contemplating in this election. Welcome back to Edmonton. For decades, the Conservatives have ruled Alberta. There's only been an NDP government once. So in theory, this election should be an easy win for Danielle Smith's United Conservatives. But if the polls are right, it's a tight race. The question is, can the NDP win over enough moderate Conservatives, what we used to call progressive Conservatives, who just can't bring themselves to support Danielle Smith? I spoke with some Albertans to get their thoughts.
There's lots of bull at the Foothills Cattle Auction in Stavely, Alberta. Thousands of head of livestock are bought and sold here, and though prices fluctuate, not much else has changed.
So that's the beginning of the Foothills right there. And so
Rob Bergevin has run this place for 2 decades.
I'm hoping that the UCP, I believe that their platform may have more economic benefit to small businesses like ours.
It's ranch country, and like the rest of rural Alberta, conservative country. Finding an NDPer here is as likely as finding a farmer without a hat. Everyone we spoke to said they'd vote UCP, but praise for leader Danielle Smith was mostly muted.
I find it difficult to trust politicians. I think that there's a lot of verbiage that's being spilled out of their mouths as they're trying to get elected, and then some of those things don't come to fruition.
Just a little nervous.
What are you nervous about?
Who's going to get in?
This couple says they hope the NDP lose, but...
Well, we can't trust either of them, really, can we?
If you've seen a politician, you could.
Yeah. I've listened to her talk shows and stuff like this, and I mean, sometimes the hardest thing, you know, to do to appease an audience is tell the truth. You know, and sometimes maybe, you know, comes in a little hot on the truth, but the truth is still the truth.
Head to Calgary, and NDP supporters are easier to find, though the ones we talked to don't sound overly enthusiastic either. When I say Danielle Smith, what do you think?
She's not my particular cup of tea.
And when I say Rachel Notley, what do you think?
I feel more optimistic when you mention her.
This couple says they support the UCP, but the leader? When I say Danielle Smith to you, what do you think?
Well, you know, wish she wouldn't talk so much.
So your voting sounds like more for the party than for the leader?
More for the party, yes, definitely.
One of the big unknowns is how many Conservatives can stomach Danielle Smith. You're not sure you can vote Conservative again?
That's right.
Why is that?
I think the leader is extreme in certain areas, in my opinion. On the other hand, I'm kind of more aligned with her economically, so I'm just kind of weighing that out in my head.
That's the only way the NDP have a chance of winning, if Conservatives stay home or switch their vote.
But I think this time we're going to go for the NDP. Last weekend, we spent time with 8, 9, or 10 individuals who are all traditionally conservative, and these are all business professionals, senior executives, have always voted conservative, and none of them is going to vote for the Conservative Party this year. We think they're kind of following our friends south of the border. Their friends, not our friends, Trump-like.
He thinks vote switchers, though, are a minority, that the UCP is likely to win. Back at the cattle auction, Rob Bergevin says the bottom line is pretty simple. Whoever wins must focus on economic prosperity.
We want people to eat beef, and you can't afford beef if you're not working, so.
And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Edmonton Skyline. We'll be back here for Election Day in Alberta. For now, thanks for watching and hope to see you again tomorrow. Bye-bye.